Today we're going to explore one of the most classic and frightening scenarios in horror stories. 7 chilling stories involving people who decided to break into abandoned houses. Get ready to learn about suspenseful situations where curiosity led groups and adventurers to discover dark secrets, unexpected dangers, and experiences that mark their lives forever. We're going to dive into stories based on real events, showing that the greatest danger isn't always in the supernatural, but rather in the unknown that hides behind doors that have been locked for years. So, sit back, check if there are any abandoned houses nearby, and let's start this chilling journey. Oh, and before your curiosity gets the better of you, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave your like. This helps the channel a lot and ensures that you don't miss any scary content like this. Let's go. 1. The top floor. London, England. The Hampstead neighborhood, with its quiet streets and Victorian mansions, has long been the subject of urban legends about abandoned houses and dark secrets. In September 2017, for young people, Emily, Lucas, Priya, and Tom decided to brave the night and explore one of the oldest mansions in the area, drawn by stories of hidden treasures and unsolved disappearances. What began as a social media-fueled adventure turned into one of the most disturbing cases ever investigated by the London police. The mansion, with its imposing facade and dirty windows, was isolated by a rusty iron gate and a garden overgrown with weeds. Emily, the most fearless, led the group around the side of the house, where they found a half-open window on the ground floor. The interior was a maze of dark corridors, furniture covered in sheets, old paintings hanging on peeling walls, and a musty smell that seemed to permeate the air. Each footstep echoed through the void, increasing the tension and the feeling that they were being watched. At first, the group laughed, took videos and photos, but as they climbed the creaking stairs to the top floor, they began to notice disturbing details. Fresh footprints in the dust, fresh food scraps on a plate, men's clothing folded over an armchair, and even a still warm kettle on the stove. Lucas suggested that a homeless person was using the place as a shelter, but the ever-vigilant Priya pointed out that everything was too clean and tidy to be just a makeshift hiding place. On the second floor, they found a locked room. Curious, Tom forced the door until the lock gave way. The room was surprisingly tidy. A made bed, books stacked high, a desk with an open notebook and recent notes. Emily leafed through the notebook and noticed that it contained details of people's arrivals and departures, sounds heard during the night, physical descriptions of neighbors, and even observations about the group itself, such as for young men, 2 girls, 2 boys, entered through the side window at 10:17 p.m. The group began to feel watched and threatened. Then they heard a noise coming from the attic. Lucas, trying to keep his brave face, went up first. The attic was cramped, lit only by a broken skylight. Among old boxes, there was a small makeshift bed, leftover food, and, hanging on the wall, a panel with photos of unknown people, some clearly taken from a distance, others cut out of newspapers. In the center, a picture of the group itself, taken outside the house that same night. Panic set in. Emily suggested leaving immediately, but as they walked back down the hallway, they realized that the bedroom door had been closed and locked from the outside. Priya tried to force the handle, but it was stuck. On the other side of the door, slow, heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. A calm, low male voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." The group tried to find another way out, but all the windows on the floor were blocked by freshly nailed boards. Panic turned to despair when Tom, trying to break through a window, was pulled back and disappeared into one of the dark rooms. Muffled screams echoed, followed by absolute silence. Emily, Lucas, and Priya hid in a closet, listening to the sound of approaching footsteps and the scraping of furniture down the hallway. The attacker, a tall man with a hooded face, knew every inch of the house. He turned off the youngsters' flashlights, cut off any attempts at communication, and used the maze of rooms and hallways to isolate his victims. A panicked Emily tried to send a message for help on her cell phone, but there was no signal. Priya, trembling, found a small ventilation window and managed to escape into the back garden, running out into the street to call for help. Meanwhile, Lucas and Emily tried to resist. The attacker left threatening notes under the doors, describing in detail the group's movements and threatening to eliminate anyone who tried to escape. At one point, Emily found a hiding place behind a bookshelf where there were old diaries of the attacker, with reports of persecutions, disappearances, and observations of residents of the neighborhood. It was clear that he had lived there for years, using the mansion as a base to monitor and eliminate anyone who approached. The police arrived minutes later, but the attacker had disappeared. Lucas was found locked in one of the bedrooms, in shock, and Emily, injured, was rescued from the attic. Tom was never found. The investigation revealed that the mansion had been used for years as a hideout by a man wanted for other disappearances in the area. He observed the surroundings, took detailed notes on everyone who approached him, and eliminated anyone who threatened his refuge. The case was featured in London newspapers, serving as a warning to young adventurers and urban explorers. The mansion was sealed off, but reports of strange sounds and lights continued to emerge from neighbors. For Emily, Lucas, and Priya, the night on the top floor left deep scars and the certainty that behind abandoned facades, the worst nightmares can hide, and that, sometimes, danger watches silently, just waiting for the next intruder. 2. The locked basement. Berlin, Germany. In the Grunewald neighborhood, where old mansions are hidden among ancient trees, two friends, Eric and Jonas, decided to explore an abandoned house that had been fueling rumors of disappearances and sinister events for years. The mansion, with its imposing architecture and broken windows, was avoided by the locals, but for the young men, it was the perfect setting for an urban exploration video that could go viral. They arrived on a cloudy March afternoon, jumping over the rusty gate and crossing the garden overgrown with weeds. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of their footsteps on dry leaves. They found a half-open side window and, with flashlights in hand, entered the house. The interior was a labyrinth of dark corridors, furniture covered in sheets, old paintings hanging on peeling walls, and an intense smell of mold. Each footstep echoed, increasing the tension and the feeling of being watched. As they explored the ground floor, Eric noticed a reinforced wooden door, locked with chains and a large padlock. Curiosity got the better of them. Using an iron bar, the two managed to break the padlock after several minutes of effort. The basement, lit only by the dim light of their flashlights, revealed a disturbing scene. Walls covered in dark stains, boxes with dirty clothes, a chair with handcuffs attached to the arm, and recent remains of food and water. Jonas found a wallet with documents of a young woman who had disappeared months before, as well as a pile of cell phones and photos of people, some clearly taken without their notice. Fear took over. Eric suggested leaving immediately and notifying the police, but as they climbed the stairs, they heard heavy footsteps upstairs. Suddenly, the basement door was locked from the outside. Panic set in. They tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. From the other side, a low, hoarse voice whispered in German, "You shouldn't be here." Trapped in the basement, Eric and Jonas searched for an alternative exit. They found a small barred window, impossible to get through, and the air became increasingly heavy. Their flashlight began to fail. In the darkness, they heard furniture being dragged and the jingling of keys. A tall, masked man slowly descended the stairs, shining a bright flashlight into their faces. He carried a long knife and wore leather gloves, walking with measured, cold steps. Eric tried to negotiate, saying that they just wanted to leave and wouldn't tell anyone what they saw. The man smiled but didn't respond. Instead, he began searching through their pockets, taking out their cell phones and wallets. Jonas, in a moment of desperation, tried to attack the attacker with the iron bar, but was easily overpowered and tied to a chair. Eric, locked in a pantry, could only hear his friend's muffled screams and the sound of footsteps moving away. Hours passed. Eric, using a rusty blade he found among boxes, managed to free himself and free Jonas, who was injured but conscious. Together, they began to look for a way out. They found a trapdoor hidden under an old rug, which led to a narrow, damp, and dark tunnel. The tunnel ended in a camouflaged exit in the back garden. As they emerged, they heard sirens in the distance. A neighbor, alerted by the screams and noises, had called the police. The attacker, noticing the movement, fled through the back of the mansion, disappearing into the woods. Eric and Jonas were found by the police in a state of shock, covered in dust and blood. The basement revealed evidence of other crimes, documents of missing persons, personal objects, and video recordings of previous victims. The investigation revealed that the attacker was a man with a history of psychiatric problems, suspected of involvement in other disappearances in the region. The case gained national attention, serving as a warning to urban explorers and the curious. The mansion was sealed, but reports of lights on and shadows continued to emerge among neighbors. For Eric and Jonas, the night of the locked basement left deep scars and the certainty that behind the closed doors of abandoned houses, real horrors can hide, and that, sometimes, danger lurks in silence, just waiting for the next victim to enter. 3. The Photographer. French countryside, September 2016. Louise, a 22-year-old art student with a passion for analog photography and rural architecture, decided to travel alone to capture images of old, forgotten houses in the French countryside. Inspired by local stories about an isolated, abandoned property on the outskirts of Limoges, she saw the perfect opportunity for a unique and striking photo shoot for her portfolio. Little did Louise know that the house held much darker secrets than any village legend could suggest. The morning was cold and misty as she parked her car on a dirt road, walking through quiet fields to the farmhouse. The building, made of stone and weathered wood, looked forgotten by time, doors creaking in the wind, windows broken, ivy climbing the walls. Louise, with her camera hanging around her neck, walked through the front door, smelling dust, damp wood, and something indefinable metallic in the air. At first, the place seemed like just another abandoned scene. She photographed details: an overturned chair, a stopped clock, old letters scattered on a table. But when she went upstairs, she found a dark room with a bookshelf full of photo albums. Curious, she opened the first album and felt a shiver when she realized that the images were not of family, but of strangers, always in everyday situations, walking on the street, sitting in cafes, looking out the window. On many faces, a look of fear or surprise. On some pages, dates and hasty notes in the margins. Louise flipped through other albums and noticed a pattern. The photos were always of different people, never the same, and many of them appeared to have been taken from a distance, as if under surveillance. In one album, she recognized the face of a young woman she had seen on a missing persons poster in the nearby village. The shock made her drop the album. A chill ran down her spine. This was not just a collection of images. It was a catalog of victims. Fear began to set in. She heard footsteps on the wooden floor from downstairs in the distance. Louise turned off the flashlight on her phone and hid behind a heavy curtain, holding her breath. The bedroom door creaked. A tall, thin man with gray hair and dirty clothes walked in calmly, carrying an old camera. He looked around, inspected the bookshelf, and quickly flipped through one of the albums, muttering to himself. Louise realized that she was standing in front of the house's former resident, and probably the person responsible for all those images. The man left the room, but Louise heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. It was locked. She tried to open the window, but it was jammed shut and covered with boards nailed to the outside. Panic set in. Searching the room, she found a small door that led to a cramped attic. She climbed up quietly, taking the camera with her, and found more boxes of albums, rolls of film and negatives, as well as women's clothing and personal items clearly taken from the victims. As she tried to find her way out, she heard the man talking to himself downstairs, loudly describing the new portraits he was going to make. Louise realized he had seen her coming, perhaps even followed her from the village, and that he was prepared for another macabre session. Time seemed to drag, every sound amplified by fear. At one point, the man came upstairs, calling to her in a calm tone, as if inviting a model to pose. Louise, trembling, found an iron bar among the boxes and positioned herself behind the attic door. When the man entered, she struck him and ran into the hallway and down the stairs. The man chased her, stumbling and shouting that she can't leave without the last photo. Louise broke open a kitchen window with the iron bar and managed to escape into the garden, running through the undergrowth until she reached the road. Bloodied and in shock, she was rescued by a farmer who was passing by on a tractor. The police were called and, upon searching the house, found dozens of albums, belongings for missing victims, and a makeshift darkroom in the basement. The man, identified as a former portrait photographer from the region, was arrested days later, hiding in a nearby forest. He confessed to having documented his victims over the decades, choosing lonely people and travelers to feed his unhealthy obsession with capturing the moment of fear. The case shocked France and gained international attention, being considered one of the most disturbing crimes involving disappearances in rural areas. Louise survived, but never photographed alone again. The house was sealed, but residents still report seeing figures and flashes of light on foggy nights. Those who knew the story were left with the certainty that behind the most innocent lenses, the worst predators can hide, and that, sometimes, danger watches in silence, ready to turn anyone into part of its dark album. Hey guys, the stories of home invasions are spine-chilling, aren't they? If you're enjoying these suspenseful stories, take a quick break, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more spine-chilling content. Now, let's get back to the next stories. There's still a lot of tension ahead. 4. The Maze of Rooms. Central Europe, 2023. The old Ravenswood Sanatorium, abandoned for decades on the outskirts of a small town, was an irresistible invitation for urban explorers. Among them were Anna, Miguel, Sophia, Lucas, and Pedro, longtime friends, united by their passion for adventure and the desire to record places forgotten by history. The sanatorium was shrouded in legends of patients who never left, mysterious disappearances, and reports of lights turning on in the early hours of the morning. For the group, all of this was fuel for another night of exploration, without imagining that they were about to experience one of the most terrifying episodes ever recorded in the region. They arrived at the place at dusk, jumping over the ivy-covered wall and crossing the overgrown garden. The building, with its imposing architecture, exuded decay. Broken windows, wide-open doors, walls covered in graffiti and signs of age. The air was cold and damp, and each footstep echoed in the empty corridors, increasing the feeling of isolation. The light from the lanterns flickered, creating shadows that danced on the peeling walls. The silence was broken only by the distant sound of dripping water and the rustling of rats. With each corridor, the maze of rooms seemed to multiply, making it impossible to know whether they were moving forward or just going around in circles. At first, the excitement outweighed the fear. The group filmed everything for the Urban Exploration channel, laughing at their own jokes and the scary stories they told each other. But as the night wore on, they began to notice disturbing details. Doors locked from the inside, makeshift mattresses in empty rooms, fresh food scraps, and clothes hanging on rusty hangers. In one of the hallways, they found a secret passage behind a fallen bookcase, revealing a narrow, damp tunnel that led underground. The atmosphere became even more tense when, upon exploring the tunnel, they found dark stains on the floor, drag marks, and personal objects, bracelets, watches, and broken cell phones. Sophia, already nervous, said she heard whispers coming from the walls, while Lucas felt a constant cold, as if someone was watching them. The fear became palpable when they found an old diary with accounts of people who had disappeared there, describing encounters with a man who hunted intruders in the tunnels and rooms of the sanatorium. Pedro, always the most curious, wandered away from the group to investigate a side corridor and disappeared without a trace. The group panicked, calling his name in vain. Tensions increased when they found recent signs of his presence: a mug of still warm coffee, a dirty knife on a table, and fresh marks on the walls. The hunter knew every secret passage, every trap. Threatening notes began to appear, handwritten, detailing the group's movements and threatening anyone who tried to escape. Paranoia eroded trust between the friends. Sophia accused Lucas of collaborating with the hunter, while Miguel tried to remain calm and find a way out. With each step, the maze seemed to change, confusing them and separating them. Anna, injured after falling into a trap, showed strength by escaping from a locked room using an improvised key made from a piece of wire. Her escape was marked by moments of pure adrenaline, dodging traps and facing the hunter in a desperate physical confrontation, managing to hit him with an iron bar before fleeing to the upper floor. Miguel and Sophia separated from the others, fought against despair and darkness, guiding themselves by the memory of the corridors and the hope of finding the exit. At a certain point, they heard muffled screams coming from one of the locked rooms. They forced the door and found Pedro, tied up and injured, but alive. The reunion was brief. The hunter, a tall man, his face hidden by an improvised mask, appeared in the corridor, blocking the only escape route. The final confrontation was brutal. Ana, Miguel, and Sofia joined forces to distract the attacker, while Pedro tried to escape through a second-story window. The ruthless hunter attacked with a knife, wounding Miguel in the arm. Sofia managed to hit the man with a fire extinguisher, opening up space for everyone to run towards the exit. The group, exhausted and injured, crossed the garden while the man disappeared back into the maze of rooms and tunnels. The rescue was late. At dawn, the police found the group in a state of shock, covered in dust and blood. The sanatorium revealed evidence of other crimes. Objects belonging to missing people, diaries, clothes, and even video recordings of previous victims. The hunter was not found, disappearing into the shadows of the nearby forest, leaving a trail of fear and mystery that still haunts the region. Ana, Miguel, Sofia, Lucas, and Pedro survived, but they bear deep physical and psychological scars. Ravenswood Sanatorium, now permanently closed, remains a grim reminder of what can happen when curiosity meets evil. The case, treated as based on real events, serves as a warning to urban explorers. Danger may be closer than one imagines, and the darkness may hide unimaginable horrors. Since then, the sanatorium has become a symbol of warning and mystery, reminding everyone that, even in places seemingly forgotten by time, evil can lurk, ready to turn a simple exploration into an endless nightmare. 5. The House of Whispers. Italy, Tuscany. In a small village far from the tourist trails, an old villa that had been abandoned for decades held secrets that few dared to uncover. In 2023, a group of 5 teenagers, Marco, Elisa, Johnny, Sofia, and Luca, decided to break into the property to record videos for their social media, attracted by the stories of ghosts and local mysteries. What began as an adventure to gain followers turned into a real nightmare. The villa, with its ivy-covered walls and broken windows, seemed frozen in time. As they entered, they noticed that, despite its abandonment, there were signs of recent occupation. Food scraps, scattered clothes, and fresh footprints in the dust on the floor. Elisa, the most cautious, suggested that perhaps someone was living there, but the others laughed, confident in their courage. During the day, they explored the rooms, filming scenes and telling stories to the camera. But as night fell, the atmosphere changed. Shadows seemed to move, and muffled sounds echoed through the hallways. Luca noticed that the doors they had locked were mysteriously open, and Sofia found makeshift traps, stretched wires, hidden spikes, and objects positioned to cause falls. Fear set in when, during the night, they began to hear footsteps and whispers coming from upstairs. Marco mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind only a muffled scream. The group, now in panic, tried to reunite, but they realized that they were being hunted by someone who knew every exit and trap in the house. Elisa, using her intelligence, tried to decipher the pattern of the traps and found an old map of the villa with secret routes and hidden passages. The attacker seemed to always be one step ahead, using his knowledge of the house to isolate and attack the teenagers one by one. The fight for survival became a race against time. Sofia was captured and taken to a dark basement, where she found traces of other victims. Johnny and Luca, wounded, tried to escape through the nearby forest, but were pursued to the limit of their strength. The next morning, the villagers found Elisa, exhausted and bloodied, leaving the property. She told them what had happened, but Marco, Sofia, Johnny, and Luca were never found. The police launched an investigation, but the attacker was never caught. The case gained national attention and served as a warning to young people and adventurers. The villa was sealed off, but residents still report strange sounds and lights that come on at night. For Elisa, the experience left deep scars and the certainty that sometimes danger is closer than one imagines, hidden in the shadows of what appears to be abandoned. Additional details reveal that the assailant used the villa's underground tunnel system to move silently, avoiding detection. He knew every nook and cranny of the property, having lived there for years before it was officially abandoned. The initially trusting teenagers were taken aback by the complex nature of the place and the cunning of their assailant. Witnesses reported that over the following nights, dim lights could be seen in the villa's windows, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the village, increasing fear among the residents. Despite intensive searches, the police were never able to find any concrete clues as to the whereabouts of the attacker, who seemed to disappear into the shadows of a nearby forest. Criminology experts who have examined the case suggest that the attacker had a deep psychological understanding of his victims, using fear and misdirection to manipulate and isolate them. The story of the Whispering House has become a grim warning about the dangers that can lurk in seemingly forgotten places and the vulnerability of those who venture there without caution. The group, initially united by friendship and the excitement of adventure, found their trust crumbling with each passing moment. Nights in the villa became a torment, with every sound amplified by growing fear. Elisa, who had always been the most rational, began to doubt her own sanity, questioning whether the attacker was real or a figment of her imagination. Meanwhile, local police intensified their search, but the dense forest and rugged terrain made progress difficult. Fearful villagers avoided approaching the property, and rumors about the Whispering House spread, driving away tourists and curious onlookers. Local media covered the case cautiously, respecting the pain of Elisa's family and the absence of the other teenagers. Documentaries and reports attempted to reconstruct the events, but the lack of concrete evidence and the disappearance of the attacker kept the mystery alive. For Elisa, survival was a double whammy. In addition to the physical injuries, she carried the burden of loss and uncertainty. She became an advocate for abandoned property safety, warning young people about the dangers of trespassing on unknown properties. The House of Whispers remains sealed, a silent monument to the terror experienced that night. And for those who pass by, the whisper of the wind through the trees seems to carry a warning. Not everything that is abandoned is forgotten, and danger may be lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. In the months that followed, Elisa participated in interviews and documentaries, trying to warn other young people about the dangers of breaking into abandoned properties. She described in detail the terror she experienced, the constant feeling of being watched, and the cunning of the attacker, who seemed to anticipate the group's every move. Additionally, reports from locals continued to surface of strange lights and unexplained sounds coming from the villa, even after it was officially sealed. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures roaming the property, adding to the mystery and fear in the area. Criminology experts have analyzed the case and suggested that the perpetrator possessed a deep psychological understanding, using environment and fear to manipulate his victims. The Whispering House has become a dark symbol, reminding everyone that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places. For Elisa, the experience changed her life forever, leaving an indelible mark on her soul and a warning to all who dare to challenge the unknown. 6. The Watcher. A remote part of Scotland, a harsh winter. A group of 5 friends, Alice, Mark, Fiona, James, and Claire, decided to spend a weekend in a secluded cottage in the Highlands, looking to escape their routine and reconnect with nature. The cottage, old but well-kept, was set back from any main roads, surrounded by dense forests and snow-capped mountains. Upon arrival, they found the place surprisingly well-equipped. Fresh food in the pantry, firewood stacked for the fireplace, and security cameras installed in strategic locations, all working and monitored by an internal surveillance system. At first, they thought the cabin was part of a luxury rental service, but they found no contact information or instructions on how to operate the cameras. During the first night, while chatting around the fireplace, they noticed that the cameras were showing real-time images of every room, including the outside. The feeling of being watched caused them discomfort, but they tried to ignore it, attributing it to modern technology. However, when they tried to go for a walk, they found the front door locked from the inside, with no key or explanation. The mood changed when, as they explored the surrounding area, they found fresh footprints in the snow that did not belong to any of them. At one point, they heard the sound of footsteps in the woods, followed by a distant gunshot. The group realized they were not alone. Someone was watching them, and they did not want visitors. The next morning, they found messages written in the snow near the cabin. Warnings to leave immediately, veiled threats, and symbols indicating protected territory. The guard, an experienced armed man, used the camera system to monitor their every move, eliminating any intruders who got too close. The group tried to escape, but the only access road was blocked by fallen trees and makeshift booby traps. The guard used the terrain to his advantage, knowing every trail and vantage point. During the chase, one of the friends was captured and was not seen again. The group, initially confident, soon realized that the cabin's isolation was not just geographic, but also a carefully planned trap. Every step they took seemed to be monitored, and their sense of security quickly turned to paranoia. Alice, the most observant, noticed that the cameras not only transmitted images, but also seemed to respond to movement, as if the guard could anticipate their actions. During the night, the silence of the forest was broken by distant sounds, cracking branches, hurried footsteps, and on one occasion, a gunshot that made everyone's hearts nearly stop. They tried to use their cell phones to call for help, but the signal was non-existent, as if the area was isolated not only physically, but also technologically. Tensions grew with each passing hour, and the group began to split up, some wanting to confront the vigilante, others seeking makeshift hiding places. Mark, the most impulsive, tried to set up an ambush, but ended up falling into a trap and disappearing without a trace. Fiona, with minor injuries, struggled to keep the group together, but fear and distrust began to corrode their friendship. James, always calm, tried to think rationally, but even he felt the weight of despair. The forest, once a setting of natural beauty, turned into a deadly labyrinth where every tree could hide a threat. After days of desperate flight, only Alice and James managed to escape, finding help in a hunter's cabin. They reported the incident to the authorities, who organized a search, but the guard was never captured. The cabin was sealed off, and the region became known as a forbidden place. The case gained international attention, serving as a warning to adventurers and tourists about the dangers of trespassing on isolated properties and the presence of armed guards willing to protect their territories at any cost. In the days that followed, Alice and James underwent extensive psychological treatment, trying to overcome the trauma of persecution and constant fear. Both reported frequent nightmares, a feeling of being watched even when they were safe, and a deep distrust of strangers and isolated places. The experience changed their lives forever, keeping them away from adventures and traveling to remote locations. The local community, shaken by the incident, began to avoid the area, and stories about the vigilante became part of local folklore, with reports of strange lights and unexplained sounds in the forest. Security experts warned of the importance of respecting private property and the presence of armed vigilantes in isolated areas, stressing that trespassing could have fatal consequences. The cabin, now sealed and monitored by police, remains a grim symbol of what can happen when curiosity and recklessness meet violence and extreme surveillance. The story of the Watcher lives on as a grim reminder that in isolated places, danger can lurk, watching every move, ready to strike, and that behind the silence and apparent peace of the wilderness, human predators can lurk. 7. The Locked Room. Scotland, Highlands, autumn 2021. Gray skies and thick fog covered the hills when three friends, Ewan, Isla, and Callum, decided to explore an abandoned Victorian mansion, isolated among woods and fields. The house was famous among locals for stories of disappearances and strange sounds coming from its hallways. But for the trio, it was just fuel for another adventure that would yield videos and stories for the urban exploration channel they maintained together. The mansion, with its imposing facade and dirty windows, seemed forgotten by time. The garden was overgrown with tall weeds and twisted trees, and the back door, half open, creaked in the wind. Upon entering, they were greeted by a strong smell of mold, rotten wood, and something metallic, almost imperceptible but disturbing. The interior was a labyrinth of dark corridors, furniture covered in dusty sheets, old paintings hanging on peeling walls, and absolute silence. broken only by their own footsteps and the distant sound of the wind. At first, the atmosphere was one of excitement. The group filmed videos, took photos, and made jokes about ghosts. But as they moved through the rooms, they began to notice disturbing details. Fresh footprints in the dust, food remains on dirty plates, men's clothing folded over an armchair, and even a still warm kettle on the stove. Isla, always the cautious one, suggested that someone might be using the place as a shelter, but Ewan and Callum, confident, continued to explore. On the second floor, a narrow hallway led to a reinforced wooden door, locked with a rusty padlock. Curiosity got the better of him. Callum found an old key in a nearby drawer and, with some effort, managed to open the padlock. What they found on the other side shocked them. The room was small, with an iron bed in the center, chains attached to the sides, scratch marks on the walls, and food scraps scattered across the floor. An old diary lay on the bed, its pages filled with accounts of suffering, fear, and escape attempts by someone held captive. Panic gripped the group. As they tried to leave, they heard heavy footsteps coming from upstairs. Someone was in the house, and it wasn't a visitor. You had tried to call the police, but there was no cell phone signal. Isla and Callum hid in a closet while Ewan looked for an escape route. The sound of a key turning in the locked room made everyone's hearts race. The man who entered was tall, with a face partially covered by stubble and cold, calculating eyes. He carried a knife and spoke little, but his presence was terrifying. The attacker revealed that the house was his hideout, where he kept victims to satisfy his violent impulses. He watched his friends with a cruel smile, knowing that they were trapped in his territory. For hours, the group tried to communicate in silence, planning an escape. The attacker moved around the house, locking doors, setting traps, and eliminating any attempt at resistance. Isla, using the darkness to her advantage, managed to find a key hidden in the attacker's pocket while he pretended to faint. With great care, she freed Ewan and Callum. The fight for survival was intense. They managed to lock the man in one of the rooms, but he threatened to break down the door at any moment. In a desperate act, Ewan found a window in the attic and, with the help of his friends, managed to open a crack to the outside. A cry for help was heard by a truck driver who was passing by on the nearby road. As they waited for help, they heard the attacker banging on doors and shouting threats. Time seemed to drag on, each minute marked by the fear that he would escape the room where he was being held. When they finally heard the police sirens, they felt an indescribable relief. Officers arrived quickly, finding the attacker still trying to force open one of the interior doors. Ewan, Isla, and Callum were rescued in a state of shock, but alive. The investigation revealed that the man was a wanted criminal for kidnappings and murders in several regions of Scotland, using abandoned houses as hiding places for his victims. The diary found in the locked room helped the police identify other missing victims. Personal belongings, clothing, and documents belonging to people who had never been seen again were found in the basement. The case gained national attention, serving as a warning to young people and urban explorers about the dangers of breaking into abandoned properties. The mansion has been sealed off, but reports of strange lights and sounds continue to surface from neighbors. For Ewan, Isla, and Callum, the experience has left deep scars and the knowledge that behind closed doors, the worst horrors can lurk, and that sometimes danger lurks silently, just waiting for the next victim to enter. They have never explored abandoned houses again, and the story of the locked room has become a grim warning to all who seek adventure in places forgotten by time. And so we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving invasions of abandoned houses. So, which one scared you the most? Will any of them make you think twice before entering a forgotten place? Tell us in the comments, which one was your favorite? If you enjoyed this dive into the darker side of abandoned places, don't forget to leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and encourages me to bring you more spine-chilling stories. And if you're not a subscriber yet, take advantage now to subscribe and activate the bell.